Welcome back. This is Purple Noon with Stephanie Conti, and I'm here with the lovely, I guess you could say the Audrey Horne to my Dale Cooper. Fun fact, it is the 30th anniversary of Twin Peaks this week, so I felt like I had to do it. But it is the Audrey Horne to my Dale Cooper, Savanna Lanause.
Very honored by that introduction, first of all. But hello, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about a personal favorite of mine. It's called The Virgin Suicides. It was directed in 1999 by Sofia Coppola. It's actually her debut film. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the plot first before we jump in.
Yeah, give the whole IMDb synopsis, everything we need to know.
So it takes place in 1970s, like, suburban neighborhood. So basically the whole movie is about these four neighborhood kids who have now grown up. And they're basically trying to piece together something tragic that happened in their childhood. There are five neighborhood neighborhood? I don't know. There are five girls they lived in the neighborhood with end up committing suicide. So the whole movie is just them piecing together memories and trying to figure out what happened to cause this horrible tragedy. So, like I said, it was directed by Sofia Coppola. It stars Kirsten Dunst, John Hartnett, James Wood, and Kathleen Turner. So I do want to say that this movie was an adaptation of a book, and the author actually is totally behind the movie. He was actually on set with them, but he did have a critique of the movie, but I'm not going to say it yet. I do want to get our thoughts.
I didn't know that. I knew it was based off a book by another person, but I didn't realize that he was actually there. I like hearing stuff like that. Okay, so all right, so you gave director, you gave some actors and actresses. Now,
yep. I'm gonna just
this was your pick, right? This was your pick.
It was my pick. I saw the movie the first time in high school, and I did love the whole. It's a very ambiguous film towards the end because you actually kind of have to figure out for yourself what actually happened. The best thing I think that can kind of, the book does give you more hints, but also with the Criterion DVD that I have. It does give you sort of interviews with like the director, the cast, and it even gives you an interview with the author. So I felt like that was a really good, if you guys want to get the DVD, or I think you could look it up. There are a bunch of interviews with the cast and even the director, which is pretty cool. They have some things to say about it. And the Criterion DVD is definitely worth it, in my opinion, if you're a big fan of the book and the movie.
Criterion, for the love of God, call us. We're episode 4 in. You can start with us early.
Oh, we're going to make them a lot of money. Or not. Who knows? But
all our 2 viewers stock up on every DVD we mention. That is the goal.
Even us. Like, I think I've spent a lot of money on just the DVDs itself. And I know you have. So we're pretty invested.
Okay. I did the math one day. I did the math of all of my just Criterion DVDs that I have. And no joke, I think I have about 70-something films.
Oh my goodness.
And so when you do the math, that is, it's a little bit bigger than some car payments. And obviously I didn't buy 70, DVDs all at once.
No,
but
yeah.
You got to be strategic about it. You got to go for the November Barnes & Noble sale, or once in a blue moon, they have the one day 50% off. You got to be strategic so that way you could get the best value for these DVDs. But even though the prices are a little bit high, if you're wondering if the bonus features of this film, they have more than what other DVDs offer. If it's especially a movie you like, I highly recommend getting the Criterion, because you're going to find supplements and you're going to find, and this is not a sponsor yet, but you're going to find so much info that it would take hours to find online. Fun fact, I did a full 13-page essay on the waterfront, just using, all of my citations literally came from the DVD and all the supplements.
It's really cool.
So, I mean, you're a film student or you got an English essay coming up, it's easy. It's easy because all you got to do is just cite the sources.
That's a really good point to make, because the Virgin Suicides DVD also comes with a documentary on how they filmed the movie. So
Oh, sweet.
you're definitely right. Like if you guys are doing an essay about it, a school project, or you just want to learn more about it, these DVDs really do come in handy.
Mm-hmm.
But what was I going to say? Yeah, so I love the film for a lot of reasons, and we can go more into detail. I think one of the things I do want to do is kind of give our little intel on what we think of the characters, because this movie is a very character-driven film.
Yeah.
So
Well, now, how about this? Before we dive deep in, let's just give the viewers, a thumbs up, thumbs down, so that way if they want to go watch it, they can, and then we'll unload the spoilers so they can come back. Our two followers
definitely.
can come back
So
and listen with us.
shout out to my husband and Caitlin. Thank you guys for listening.
Not even my boyfriend. Not even my boy. Actually, no. My
No, your
boyfriend is
boyfriend-
technically 3. He has to listen to all of these because he edits all of the podcasts. So shout out to Zach.
Definitely. But yeah, so you guys know I already love this film. It's definitely in my top 50. I don't know what you think about it yet, because it's not a film we watched together or we've been talked about. So I'm actually really excited to see. If you think it sucks, it's not going to hurt my feelings, be honest. But
no, so like just to tell the people like who are listening, and if they're like, oh, should I watch this movie and then come back and then listen to the podcast? Absolutely. I think you should watch the movie. I think it's enjoyable. I think it's also, from the movies we're going to be talking about, I definitely think it's one of the movies that we're going to come across that is one of the most recommendable, because I feel like it appeals to a lot of generations. So if you are interested in this movie, go watch it. It's on Amazon. Go watch it, or the Criterion Channel. Actually, no, it's not on the Criterion Channel. My bad. It is on Prime or Crackle. Go watch it. Come back, because, I mean, I recommend it, and obviously she recommends it. But now, Savannah, I want to know why this is in your top 50, because it didn't peak in mine.
Okay. No, that's
I
fair.
liked it, but I want to know why, for you, it's in your top 50.
It resonated with me a lot in high school for some reason. Not that like I'm suicidal or anything. I just want to get out there. But I really like I think it paints a very realistic picture on suicide, because it talks about the people that we leave behind. In the film, the 4 boys that narrate it's a big impact on their lives. Like they talk about how like literally 30 years later they still get together and talk about it. So I really love that aspect of like what happens to the people that deal with it afterwards. I thought I really like the fact that it's very dreamlike. And I do like the characters a lot. Like all the boys, Trip Fontaine, I really like him. I'll tell you in a minute.
Oh my God, Trip Fontaine.
But I definitely like the characters. It's just one of those movies I could watch a few times a year. That's how much I enjoyed it.
You know what? This movie I would recommend is like, like a little rainy Sunday day. Like it's very mellow. I think it's a good pace.
Not a happy film, so yeah.
It's not a happy film, no. But it's one of those things, like, on like YouTube, they have like those compilations where it's like lo-fi chill music. This is like lo-fi chill music if it was a sad movie.
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of. But for me, what I really enjoyed about the film, the storyline, it was okay to me. I do like what you had mentioned, and I really didn't think about it, how the suicide resonates with these young boys and the narrator, which, by the way, the narrator is, and because I was like, I know that voice. Do you know who the narrator was?
I do know who the narrator is. I looked it up because I was like, he sounds really familiar. I do know
Giovanni Ribisi, who I actually think is related to Sofia Coppola. I think she is related. I know, but I could be getting confused with Jason Schwartz.
I don't know. I actually don't know. Maybe it could be a possibility. But no, I don't know if they're related or not. But yeah, that's who narrates
but
it.
I really enjoyed the narration of it. And
too.
I think what for me made the film, like, made me like it and made me want to recommend it, was the directing and the music. I love the music that was
soundtrack.
used.
I was blasting Magic Man in the Walmart parking lot today picking up my groceries. I love the soundtrack. Magic Man is the song where Trip Fontaine is introduced. A very psychedelic 70s song, and I was just like, what an entrance. What an entrance.
It's okay, so I let's talk about characters now. So with characters, I thought, in my opinion, Trip was the best character because we got to know him in depth. And I mean, like, because he was shown as a youngin', and then was shown years later as an adult recapping on,
Yeah.
you know, his memories. I thought he was very well written, as well as Lux and Cecilia. But sadly, I thought that the other sisters, I felt like there could have been more to them, just a little bit more.
I agree. I think the thing about this movie is it really tries to stay. It's very accurate to the book, apparently. I've read the book a long time ago, but I really can't speak too much on it because I read it in high school. But Lux and Cecilia are the only characters you kind of really get to know. There's only a little bit about Mary and Bonnie, but I agree they could have given us something more.
Or at least something to distinguish them, because like obviously I knew who Lux was, I knew who Cecilia was, but at some point the rest of the three sisters, I kept mixing and getting confused.
Yeah.
And I understood Lux's motive and I understood Cecilia's, but because there wasn't a little inkling, I didn't really understand the rest of the girls' motives.
So in the book, just to give, I guess, you and anybody else that has perspective, one of the sisters is like, just to maybe, we'll get into what happens at the, obviously, like suicide, but
Mm-hmm.
we'll get into what more happens at the end. But basically in the book, one of them is very not attractive. So they figure like, okay, like that could have been something there. And then the other one was like very awkward and just skittish. I know there was another one, but I can't remember what it was. So the book does give you like very little crumbs on like what could have happened there.
Yeah.
But you're definitely right. Like the story is basically focused on Cecilia and Lux of the Lisbon family.
Like even if, like, for example, like, because, and I understand that, you know, Sofia Coppola would want to remain true to the author's adaptation. I think maybe like a little trait, like a physical attribute or trait, that like maybe like one of the girls wore like a specific, I don't know, beret in their hair, or, you know, like a something just to identify the rest of the three sisters. Because I felt like Cecilia and Lux were so, like, they were just the face of that family, those two girls. And I just wish I got, like, at the end I was like, I felt bad for Cecilia and Lux, but I don't know why I should feel bad for the other girls, because they seem to have it good. Like, that was how I interpreted from not knowing about the other three girls, and not giving like hints as to why their fate was chosen for them that way.
I totally agree with you. I think we'll talk a little bit when we talk about the end of the movie. There is a theory on like why all of them committed suicide, like the four of the sisters after Cecilia committed suicide, and we can talk about that. But I love Trip Fontaine because he comes across as shallow, but he's actually a very intricate character, because if you watch the movie, you'll know that Trip has two dads, and the dads are no help in his life at all. They're handing him margaritas and like, yeah, like you figure it out. And we'll get into spoilers in a bit, but I really do think that his character comes full circle in the football scene.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of hard to bounce around the whole spoiler thing. I'll just say it outright. All of them die. Like, it's one of those movies.
I knew that,
all
but
the
I didn't
girls
know
die.
if we were talking about like what happens to Lux and like.
I said I gave a spoiler warning in the beginning.
Yeah,
it's
you know
all
what?
good.
Whatever. Cool. Watch the movie. Don't watch the movie. The movie's like 20 years old. So sorry.
So when we were tiptoeing around the fact that we understood why two of the girls killed themselves, but the rest of the remaining three, at least in my opinion, I didn't understand why they did. Savanna said in the book that there was more insight as to why, but even still in the book, it was never fully explained. I mean, it kind of makes sense too in that way, because if it is from the perspective of the boy's life rather than the girl's life,
yeah, they can't just give us an explanation.
They're just going to know the girls that stand out the most, which would have been Cecilia, the first one to go, and then Lux, the one who deviated from their Christian morality. So, I mean, she was sleeping with dudes on the roof. Like, they could see. They had a little telescope and everything. I mean, of course, they're going to be paying attention to her more than the other girls that are just, you know, passed out in their room. But Trip was really good, too. Trip was a really great character.
You know, why do you think, because we're going to ask a lot of questions in this podcast, because again, like, a lot of what we're going to be saying is also speculation on our part, but there, in the movie, there's a scene where him and Lux do have sex on a football field after homecoming, and afterwards he just leaves, and his explanation was, I just didn't feel it for her at that moment, and I got sick of her. Why do you think that is? What is your interpretation of that scene?
I don't know. You know what? I feel like a big portion of this movie, it kind of plays as if you know what? It gives the impression to me, it might not give it to everyone, that suicide is kind of like this virus. And, or, at least some type of dark temptation is some kind of that. And I wondered if maybe somehow subconsciously that played into that character. Um, or maybe it was just a fact because he was saying like how crazy he was about her. Maybe it came from a point of, not deserving her type of deal, but that's still
Mm-hmm.
like
So
it would
yeah,
definitely leave it to your own interpretations. But what do you think about it?
I think that these girls in the movie are portrayed as these like dreamlike, almost like the author goes to say like they're entities, like they're sort of looked at as unreachable. And I felt like when
Yes,
Trip finally had her, the whole mystique of her was ruined, which
I
is
could
not
see
an
that too.
excuse. Like I'm sorry, he sucks for that. Like that's a really bad move to
Yeah, no,
play.
he's well written, but he's not entirely likable in that sense.
But he ends up. You see him later in life in a rehab clinic, so he got really messed up later in life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that plays into like what happened that night. But you talked about the suicide being a virus, and that was one of the theories that like once Cecilia killed herself, then it was just kind of like a dominoes effect with the rest of the girls.
Yeah. Like with maybe like cuz it just felt that way, especially like in the end when they have that like really creepy party, like this whole creepy party where everything is like in a swamp theme color tone. And it
Then
just kind of seems like the air is seeped with I don't know, it just seems like it's seeped in sadness, like the whole air and the atmosphere that they paint. So it made me wonder if like maybe since rather Lux was affected equal infected, then she passed on something to Trip, and then hence why maybe his thoughts about,
mm-hmm.
her and realizing what's happened to her affected him and maybe realized because from what we saw, he didn't just from there on, it kind of seemed like he was in the rehab because of her.
Yeah, yeah.
So obviously, I mean,
I mean, he does say like I've never loved anybody, and they were like 16 years old, like 17, like they were very
mm-hmm.
young. So the fact that he's still like he's 40 years old, and he's like, yeah, I still love my 14-year-old love. It's very no, it's very telling that kind
Yeah.
of shows you how like messed up he was after she killed herself.
Yeah, because I've wondered if it's like because it's very in terms of like what you said before, how they handle suicide is very realistic, and I believe that suicide in society kind of trickles into people's lives almost like a small virus, not trying to freak anyone out since we're in a friggin' pandemic, but that's always been my impression of suicide, where it's like even the people who don't have contact, like you're still it can seep in, like especially those boys, even though those boys had a little bit more of a direct confrontation
Yeah.
with it, it's still it affected them more than we could have ever thought. Like in my opinion, like it felt like it affected the boys more than the parents.
Well, I think we should talk about the parents now because after Cecilia killed herself, you kind of see how they handle it, and it's not the most normal situation. The
No,
dad
it,
gets
it
really
kind
sucked
of
into the TV. They kind of sweep it under the rug, it seems like. They're just like, let's move on and let's lock our girls in the
and
house
and that's what
forever.
they did in the end too. That's what they
Yeah.
did in the end too when they lost all the girls. They kind of just, closed off the house, had everyone else take care of the house, and then they just restarted their lives. Which I mean, it's not unrealistic, but at the same time it kind of already showed that the parents weren't present, I guess you could say. In
Yeah,
my
and
opinion,
like
the parents weren't present.
the quote she says at the end, she goes, I never understood why they killed themselves. That's also very telling. Like, you have
Mhm.
no idea why your daughters could have all ended their lives within a year. Really. So it just kind of tells you, like, well, what did you think of the parents? Let's start with that.
So, I thought the father was very weird. Like, he was
Yeah.
very neurotic because, like, there's, like, one part, it just looked like he was talking to plants. Like, do you remember that scene where he's going up and someone's like, "Hey, you good?" And he's just chatting with plants. I felt like that and it could have been because of their super strict religious background that was already set for these characters, that in some way they're probably their religion and what they were taught was not to, you know, identify what happened, just kind of sweep it under the rug,
Well,
like you had
yeah,
said.
yeah. I mean, well, let's talk about the priest. How'd you feel about the priest? Because I have an opinion about Father Moody.
Father Moody didn't do well. He wasn't a good priest.
Why
Like,
did he look like a rock star? Why did he have long hair? I've never met a priest that looked like him.
I did look at him. I'm like, I know the actor. Why did they pick him to play the priest? Like, it was very, and
It's a
then
very
also the fact that he just goes up, like, that the dad's like, yeah, they're upstairs. Go check them out. Like, but I'm sorry. It could be because the times have changed, but my parents wouldn't let a priest just come into my room and be like, hey, you good? They'd be right next to him.
Yeah, well, remember they were really religious, so they probably had a lot of trust in Father Moody. But I didn't like the way he looked. I was like, no.
Yeah, he just came in and was like, you guys good? Nah? Okay, see ya. And then he never came back.
No, he never came back at all.
And then Danny DeVito's in. He's like, you just need boys.
What
You
was
just, you,
that? And then she kills herself because of that. Why? Why would you tell somebody? He was just like, I mean, I understand like the whole like she because at the end of the day she did need like interaction with people, but like his advice was, oh yeah, she needs to be around men. And it's like, what? What kind of
yeah. And then if you
psychiatrist?
notice, the parents, they went all against what was even like the whole interaction thing. They went entirely what Danny DeVito said as the therapist, and they put them on lockdown. They put the kids on lockdown, and it's like, huh? Like what?
I think after Cecilia killed herself at the party, it was kind of just like, right, no more parties, nothing. That's what did it. I feel like that's probably what happened. And the mom character in general, like, I think she's interesting because you always see her just put on a sweater. I don't like that. Oh, time too late.
Get your feet off the table. Your feet are too sexy. It's like, what?
So you never see the mom character interact with her children besides, you know,
Like, cover yourself up. You're not meant to, like, for me, like when I was watching her and she was like, and there was like a topic where they were talking about, she was like, I gave them love, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, it's like in every scene that we saw, it wasn't love. It was like very like put your leg down. It was
and
always
she
something.
burns her daughter's records in front of her. Like it was just very. You could tell there's a lot of delusion in that family because at the end she's like, "Oh yeah, I love my kids," and it's just like, really, you loved your kids,
But
huh?
there was delusion from the get-go,
Yeah,
not just with the parents, but with the girls too,
yeah.
because everyone was like, your sister just killed yourself. Why are you laughing? Why is the lamest dude in the school making you laugh? Like, it was very, like, already from the get-go, we already knew that there was something with all of them wrong with them.
Yeah, you
They
could
didn't
tell
breathe.
they weren't a normal family. You could
No.
from the get go. So how do we feel about? I know we kind of glossed over this character. What about Cecilia? We didn't really talk about Cecilia a lot.
Cecilia, I can't say, I mean, I did like Cecilia, but even though I knew the most with her and Lux, even though I know the most about her, between her and then compared to the other three sisters and Lux, um, it just felt like we didn't get to know her until the character was off the screen.
Yeah, but I think that's what was meant. I assume.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think we were supposed to go, well, why did a young 13-year-old kill herself? I mean, I think that we were supposed to have that reaction.
Right.
But I feel very indifferent about her because I felt like I didn't get to invest in her like I got to invest in Lux and Trip, that whole romance. It was just kind of like, here's the little runt of the family and she's gone in 10 minutes. It's like, what? Okay.
I did like the actress who played her. I personally liked her and the mom and Trip Fontaine. I think they were probably the best in the movie, in my opinion. But I did like the Cecilia character because when she commits suicide twice. Like she tries once and then
Attempts, yeah, she attempts the first time and then the second time
she
it
completes it.
succeeds. Yeah.
But I did like her character because you can kind of tell the first time, like when she's in the hospital, she's like, the doctor's just like, why are you here? Like, you're too young. And she's like, well, you've never been a 13-year-old girl. And I feel like that sets the tone for the movie. Just that little quote in the hospital.
Oh yeah, that was automatically, you're like, oh, we're not going to understand these characters, you know, um, which isn't, I don't think not being able to understand them, I don't think that hinders the film at all. I
But I
think
think
it
that's the
adds
point.
something.
I think we're not really supposed to fully understand, like,
I mean, it's realistic. I mean,
yeah,
if we knew everything and why they killed themselves, then it's kind of like it defeats the whole purpose of being realistic. Because sadly, when people do kill themselves, in majority of cases, we don't know why.
yeah, I agree.
But in terms of directing, fantastic. That is to me, because the plot, I like something to be invested in. I felt like because of the movie and the way it played out, I couldn't get invested already, because from the beginning I was like, these girls are screwed. And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, I'm afraid to get invested. I don't want to, fall too deep. But and it also, the film itself didn't give just enough to become invested. Was I invested in the story overall? Yeah, I was invested in the film, but I wouldn't say I became invested in the characters so
Yeah, yeah,
much.
I understand.
But for me, what made this film like would make me recommend it to people is the directing. I think the directing is fantastic. I love the colors that she plays with. Sofia Coppola. I love the certain angles, the montages, even the little things like when, Lux is in front of Trip and you just see like a little, almost like a little X-ray vision of her underwear and her underwear says Trip. It's like I
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah, that's
those
cool.
little moments that are just meant to kind of like put everything together. And I thoroughly enjoyed Sofia Coppola's directing in this. What did you think about it?
I do like the directing. I like the tone, the color tones for the movie. I thought they were very, very good. Um, I just love how the movie kind of plays out. I feel like the movie, it gives you that traditional, plot line and gives you the traditional sequences. But I do like the fact that like it's very dreamlike. You kind of feel like you're in a daze the whole time, which I think is great because these are boys like retelling their memories. So I feel like that's perfect already. I love the soundtrack.
The soundtrack is what I think makes this film from, okay to really good, because it is, I had talked about soundtrack. I forgot, I think I talked about it for Talented Mr. Ripley, where
Hmm.
a movie like that, although the soundtrack was good, it didn't heighten the story. This one and the directing completely heightened and made the experience of the movie overall so much better. Like, I don't think there could have been any other soundtrack that could have portrayed that dreaminess quality so beautifully, elegantly. It's almost like a soft I don't even know, like I almost said soft depression, because it's like a soft dream like depression, because it's not cheerful. It's not
No,
cheerful dreamy.
no.
It's cheerful gloom.
Yeah, I mean,
That would probably be the best thing to say, cheerful gloom.
yeah, yeah. I think that's good. I like. It's also very psychedelic, which is also you could say is part of like a dream. Like when people listen to psychedelic music, they're usually like taking drugs back in the 70s. So I
Yeah.
feel like that also adds to like the whole era situation. But
And it wasn't cheesy too. Like even today watching it, it's still very, I guess you could say, relevant to our, modern day art, I guess you could say, if that makes sense. Like it didn't felt like, this is a cheesy 70s 90s, because it was made in the 90s but it takes place in the 70s. Didn't feel cheesy. It still felt very relevant. Even the storyline still felt very relevant to today.
mhm, I agree. I'm trying to think what else. There's a lot. Okay, the end of the movie. So what do you? I'm trying to think. I was gonna ask you. Another theory is: do you think they all talked about it and decided, okay, like we're gonna kill ourselves together, or do you think it was just one of those things where they did it on their own?
Well, I definitely think they had to talk about it, because it was very, it's it's very strategic, their death. And what I mean by that is that they each chose different places and different ways to kill themselves.
Right.
And with everything that happens in this film and the way it plays out, especially with Lux in the end being the last one to kill herself, the last one to see the boys, have a little conversation with them before she goes in the car and kills herself, which
Oh,
that
that's
was
true.
that was one thing that didn't quite make sense to me. Why did they have to submerge these kids into their death? That was something that didn't quite make sense to me. Why did they have to bring these kids to witness that?
Well, I think my thing is, I think it's because they are the last ones they had contact with. I don't know what the reason was of like they need to see us kill ourselves, but I do feel like towards the end of their lives, like they were their only friends, their only contact with the outside world. So I feel like maybe they wanted to be seen one last time. Maybe like this was a way to be like, this is what was happening to us. I don't know either. I think it's one of those mysteries of the book and the story. But the only thing I can come close to thinking is they were the last people to really be around them, in a way.
And I think maybe it was, I wonder if, because they made it seem like that all the girls were like, hey, come over, we'll hang out, we'll escape, all that stuff like that. Meanwhile, I think it was just Lux who wired them and said, hey, like at midnight, blah, 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 knowing, because they had mentioned that one of the girl was way dead. Like by like the time she fell asleep because she took sleeping pills, like she was dead before they even arrived.
Right.
So I wonder if it was a way for maybe Lux to see if just by some chance, if I think because her only saving grace would have been if Trip came in and was there.
Oh, that's a really
So
good theory. That's really
I w-
good.
I wonder if maybe she knew that her sisters were all going to do it, and Lux might have been like, okay, I'll do it, but only if Trip doesn't come.
That's a really, really good theory. I didn't think of
Because they
that.
did because I think one of the messages had said something about Trip,
Yeah,
but they couldn't get in contact with him.
it said that I'm over him, tell him he's a creep or something. Like it was just her being like, he sucks and I hate him, pretty much. But I think you're right. It could have been her last little like, let's see if he shows up.
And that's why I think she killed herself last, because there's a little bit of like hesitation when she talks to the boys, like you're like, oh yeah, they're coming out soon, like kind of like she's swallowing her fate, like she's realizing everything is happening. It's like, okay, gonna go in the garage now. And it's like, it's sad, it's sad as hell, but that's my theory on the end, because anything else, like if they had all been alive the moment the boys showed up there, then that wouldn't have made any
Yeah, I
sense.
agree.
So I think it was, and it kind of makes sense now the more I talk about it, because in a way the the three other girls that we really didn't get to know about, they really didn't have, from what the movie showed, anything in their lives that meant something
No,
to them.
no, like they didn't. I mean, you could see a lot in the prom scene where they go to prom or homecoming. One of the girls are just like, "This is the best day. Like this is the best day of my life." So right there,
Mhm.
that should tell you these girls like had no life, none, nothing to hold on to from themselves, no passions. They were very mundane, very just like well. So I feel like their deaths do reflect that.
And I wonder if maybe that note that was made out to Trip somehow got back to him. And that's why he's in this state. Like, that's why we see him older in rehab, because maybe after seeing the note, he thought that he was to blame for at least her death.
I mean, I pretty much he is. Like if you really think about it, like he really
I mean, yeah.
it's majority of his fault that she dies.
Yeah, sadly to say. I mean, it's also I mean, it's a big portion of the parents too and their
Oh
situation,
yeah, no.
their
If
way
they
of
let her out of the
raising.
house, then I feel like
Well, because when in my opinion, when you have parents that, cover up a brother or sister's suicide as if it's nothing happened, you now destroy the meaning behind death.
I
when you kind of bury it under, it's like kind of like whatever, like it happens to everyone. Like you don't get to fully process that the repercussions of it and how it affects other people, because for them it's like, oh, like she died, we swept it under the rug. That's what everyone else will do,
yeah.
but that's not realistic. So that's what I thought. I don't like the parent. If there's any parents listening, don't do that to your kids. If there's something that grave, for the love of God, I'm not allowed to give advice. I'm a 21-year-old female with no kids.
I mean,
But
no,
based off this movie, it don't work.
yeah, no, seriously. I mean, like, you have a father that doesn't care. And I'm gonna be honest, the father seemed more interested in the boys coming to their house than,
Look at my little Asian toys.
yeah, than the daughters, and then the mom who's just a monster. So you have those two people as parents, and you're a shut-in, you can't leave the house. Yeah, things like that are gonna happen.
Who would
Um,
have thought on episode 4, while after watching the Virgin Suicides, we not only give out parenting advice, but life advice as well.
exactly, where we know it all from this movie. But
Seriously.
I did wanna mention one other thing. My favorite part of this movie, one of my favorite, is Dominic Pizzolo. Do you remember that part? The little Italian kid strutting in the neighborhood?
With the oh my God, yes. Yes, and before he jumps, he's like, "I love her."
Yes,
And he
yes.
but he's okay, he lives.
And he just walks off? Yeah, he's great. I feel like that
I
sort of
loved him.
introduces the, but I do feel like that has a purpose, though. It wasn't just for comedic relief, like, he kind of does introduce this little hint of suicide. Even though if it was
Yeah, like,
dramatic and characterish, like, it's introduced
well,
through
because
him.
Cecilia dies by jumping out of her window, so it probably that's, because they came in and didn't they rule her suicide as accidental?
Both
Didn't
times.
that
Both times.
both
And then all
times?
the other girls were also ruled as accidental, which is
That's
which is
weird.
suspicious to me. You think if all 5 of your children kill yourself, there'd be legal reproduction, like, legal problems there. Like, you
There'd be a thorough
if all your
investigation.
children kill themselves, you don't like, I would think the police would get involved or the paramedics and be like, "What was going on?
Like,
We
no
were
one
here
should be
last year."
looking at that and going, "That's just a bad coincidence." Like, no, like, there's gotta be interrogations, there's gotta they gotta do autopsies, like, that like, I understood why they could have claimed Cecilia as accidental, because maybe she was just like, "I love her," and then, went to go out, but then accidentally fell on the spike. But so that could have been accidental, that could have been it, but at the same time, why you have a 13-year-old girl jumping out of a window at, like,
Who
9
tried to commit
PM?
to suicide, what, like 2 or 3 months before? Like, and then all the other girls, like, they were also counted as accidental, but one of them hung themselves. I don't really? Like,
Yeah.
how is that? So, I don't know, I've always thought, like, them just walking away scot-free isn't realistic. Like, all 5 of your kids kill themselves, there's gonna be issues.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's okay for this film to be a little bit unrealistic at some points because it's very dreamlike. That's where it's kinda like it gives off almost like a Pleasantville type of situation where it's like, yes, this is in a different time, in a different society, and it's too dreamy to even happen, like, too dreamlike. Very, David Lynch, in my
Mhm.
opinion. But I think it's okay for it to not be realistic at some points, because just from the get go, the little Italian kid strutting the street, we knew this film wasn't going to be, you know, relatable or, realistic by any chance of the way.
Um,
But
I
I think it
yeah,
was
yeah.
overall, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the film.
Sorry, one last thing I'm gonna say is something that, the author of the story says. So he is actually a big supporter of the film, but his only critique is that he would have wanted different actresses to play the girls. He said
I
that,
mean,
like, he never thought as of the girls as actual people, but more as the, like, entity. So his thing was, his point of view was just like, I would have had different characters for each girl, and they would change depending on who they're talking to. And I thought that would have been a really cool way to do it, but at the same time, I would understand if people would got confused. Like, you're gonna have five characters played by what, 25 different actresses?
but that would have honestly, like, especially like from if they that would have been really good. If that I'm not in support of like all remakes, but let's say 10 years down the road they wanted to remake this, I would hope they do that execution because that would explain a lot with Trip and what happened, because it could have been a type of thing where, you know, she looked like one girl, you know, during sex, and then immediately after when he pulls away, it's an entirely different woman.
No, I definitely agree. I think that would have been cooler, but I see the challenges in doing that.
Oh yeah, like like in a narrative perspective, it would have been hard, especially since you probably would have had three different types of actresses, because you would have had actresses how the boys saw the girls. You had to have actresses for how
The
the
parents? Yeah.
parents saw girls, and then everyone else, and then even themselves. Like how like we would never know how they looked at themselves if you had. So that would be one of the
I mean,
issues.
I
I mean,
would have done it when all the girls died. I would have picked an actress just for that, so we could finally see like who they really were. I think that's an awesome idea, though. I would love to see that at some point because I feel like that's kind of what the point of the movie was. Exactly.
yeah, the whole reason why it was dreamlike and super dreamy was because girls like that didn't exist in reality. They only existed in dreams. Now, I could see different actresses for that time being used. Like, uh, is it Kristen or
I
Kirsten
think it's
Dunst?
Kirsten, like because it's spelled
Kirsten?
K-I-R.
I'm gonna say Kirsten. I'm gonna
Kirsten.
say
Okay,
Kirsten because
well,
that feels right.
okay.
Kirsten, Kirsten, I could understand because I noticed when looking at one of the sisters, I was like, why isn't she Lux? And like, because I don't know if it might have been uh
Could have been an
Kirsten's acting.
age thing too.
It could have been that, but there was one of the sisters I thought would have been, because she was, in my opinion, more dreamy looking than Kirsten. Nothing wrong against Kirsten. It was just that was just the vibe I got. But it could have been probably just because acting purposes. Maybe Kirsten was Lux for that reason. They were also, apparently I had read that the girl who plays Cecilia was supposed to play Lux
I
in the beginning.
No, that girl looks 12.
Yeah, that's why they changed her, because they thought she looked really, really young for her age.
Yeah.
But she originally was given the role of Lux. So, and I mean, at that point too, Kirsten Dunst actually looked a little bit. All the girls at some point looked a little bit older than the age that they were supposed to be playing,
Well, and I
in my
think they did that
opinion.
on purpose, especially with Lux. Like, you can't actually have a 14-year-old girl in some of those scenes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Obviously, I think she was supposed to be. What was it? 15, 16?
14.
I. She was supposed to be 14.
Because she was the second youngest to Cecilia. She was supposed to be 14 years old, like really, really young.
Oh,
And
yeah, no. Okay, Kirsten's a good pick, because if they had gone with Cecilia, it would have looked a little jarring, to say the
yeah,
least.
yeah.
But I mean, overall, I definitely recommend the film. Um, I enjoyed it. It's different. You don't see a lot of films like that. The only thing I could really compare it to in terms of like the feel of it would be Donnie Darko. Is that a weird comparison to
I
make?
could see with the school. I think that's what you're thinking of because, like, Donnie Darko does go to like this similar school. Like, they're both in private schools.
It just, for some reason, when I think about these two, the way that the main characters are perceived reminds me of how Donnie Darko is perceived.
Hmm.
Not the whole rabbit stuff, but just how the dreaminess of, Jake Gyllenhaal is in Donnie Darko is like. That's what it reminds me, and that's the only thing I could comparatively, you know, say side by side what Virgin Suicide reminds me of. If you had to pick a film that comes close to Virgin Suicides, what would you pick?
That's really, really hard, actually. Donnie Darko is a good one. I really didn't think about it too
Mm-hmm.
much. Um,
I think it's just because it really is different. There's nothing that you can watch and be like, this is exactly like Virgin Suicides, or vice versa to any other film. Um, but I think that's great. I think that's great on the writer's part, and I think that's great on Sofia Coppola's part.
yeah, and I when I first saw the movie, I was surprised because I'm not a big Sofia Coppola fan by any means. I like two of her movies, and I'm not really a fan of the rest. But I think she did a really good job with this film.
See, this is my introduction to Sofia Coppola. I haven't seen any of her other films. Like, I've seen bits and pieces here and there, but I haven't sat down and fully watched. But I mean, like, she's a good director. Like, just from this, and this was her. Like, you were right. This was her debut film, and
Yeah.
it for a debut film, crap, that's great. That's amazing. But I enjoy this, and if I were to rate it, I'd give it a 7. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm pretty close. A 7.5.
Pretty
Yeah,
close.
7.5.
All right. Any other little tidbits or fun fact you have to say about it?
They were almost gonna cast Alicia Silverstone as Lux,
I could see that.
and Scarlett Johansson was offered like any role she wanted, but she didn't take it because she thought it was like really intense, and she was really young at the time. I think she was 18 or 19, so she was like,
Oh
no.
wow.
But
Huh.
yeah, those are my fun facts.
All right. So you've heard it from us. We recommend Virgin Suicides. Bring a box of tissue if you're a little weepy, if you're in the mood to cry a little. Um, it is dark, but it's still recommended. It's still enjoyable, especially with the music and with, the whole introduction to Trip and everything. I think on behalf of both of us, I can say that we highly recommend this film.
Definitely. Dominic Pizzolo stole a show for me. That's what I thought
Dominic
about after the movie.
Dominic Pizzolo.
Love him.
Oh man. Okay, so next time you'll be hearing from us, we're going to be talking about another Criterion, 310 to Yuma, the original, not the one with Logan Lerman. So the original 310 to Yuma. So that should be fun. That's totally different from this movie.
That's a Western, right?
Yes, it's a Western.
Ooh.
But until then, we will hear from you guys soon and take care. Hope you enjoyed.
Bye.